Please work.
It's always this little time right here where you're never quite sure.
I implore thee. Okay. We need to mute that, or it'll pick us up.
Yeah, and then we'll all go like this. Turn everything off.
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I believe we're gonna go.
at 11:02.
You're fine.
She's notorious.
Yeah.
She's notorious.
For being 11:02.
Yes.
It's routinely 2 minutes.
Yeah,
I thought I was late.
I think we should start putting like 11:02 on the calendar. For lynching.
I call to order the meeting of the Legislative Committee for the City of Salem for July 12th, 2024. President Arhoy.
Nishioka. Nordike. Stapleton.
All right, first up, we have legislative updates from our friends at Summit, Mark and Terry. And I see Mark here, Terry, oh, here comes Terry now.
Terry was having some technical difficulties, but I think he's appears to be on his way in, so.
Yeah, we've had a Zoom Teams
Debacle.
fight. And Zoom
No,
won.
no, it always does.
Yeah,
Yeah, I seem to have two different links for this meeting every week, so I gotta sort that out.
yeah, there's a city email thing where we like to put a Teams link on everything, or at least pretend it's a Teams meeting, even when it's not. Our system is really helpful that way. So Mark and Terry, you're up.
Absolutely. Thank you all. It's good to see everyone. I had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time last week in your fair city when it was like 100 degrees. But no, it's good to see you all here on today's call. Quick federal update right now and kind of what's going on is pretty much everything is appropriations all the time right now. They're actually going through their process and doing their work and trying to pass bills out of committee and doing things like that in the House.
Yeah, a couple ways.
Sorry, we're just trying to turn you up because we couldn't hear you very well.
Let me see.
No, it's on our end.
It's us, it's not
Okay.
you.
It's a
Okay.
volume thing.
You're perfect now.
So talk about appropriation, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the House has been diligently passing all their bills, at least out of committee, and moving things along and moving things forward there, which is a good, promising sign. That has included the House passed bills has included funding for two of the three appropriations requests that the city of Salem had for the airport and for the something that now is totally escaping my mind right now, but I think it's law enforcement.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about that. Quick brain lapse. Which is great. Both those via Congresswoman Andrea Salinas. This is the kind of scenario similar to in the past. Historically, if there are appropriations bills at the end of the whole Congress, they have not bounced any earmarks that have been included that are eligible projects. Our projects are eligible. That funding should be in the final version of the bill, which is great. On the Senate side, we're alive for additional funding and potentially more funding for even some of those projects that we got on the House. And the Senate has started moving on their appropriations bills as well. So that process is in motion. The downside, I would say, on that is the House this week tried to move the legislative branch appropriations bill, which is by far the smallest and usually among the least controversial of the bills. And it went down. They failed to actually pass it. So that's not great. Although my belief on all of this with approps going back to the debt ceiling agreement about a year and a half ago, when there was actually an agreement on the structure on which the next 2 years of funding bills we're going to operate, including spending caps, leading up to the speaker being ousted and Speaker Johnson taking place, is the way they're going to kind of run this is they're going to let some of the more passionate members of the House Freedom Caucus kind of have their say and blow up bills and move and kind of kill things and add additional things are going to make the process kind of seem unworkable and seem if it's not being productive and seem to be going off the rails. And then at the end of the day, they'll reach an agreement with the Senate. They'll do a bill that actually can pass and will need to pass through the House with Democratic votes and with an overwhelming number of votes. The process they're working under now would typically at the end of the day require like 2/3 of all the voting members of the House in order to pass things. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is we're seeing kind of we're going to have what appears to be a lot of disarray and a lot of disruption. But the speaker has shown, I think, a desire and a willingness to kind of move things along and actually accomplish things and get things done and keep the government funded. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at right now on the approps side of things. Terry, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's all spot on. I would just add that, this is going to be a long process. It's going to just get dragged out. While we're feeling very good about these marks remaining in, and I share that belief with Mark, just keep in mind that this past fiscal year, the current fiscal year we're in, wasn't fully funded until March or April and made final. So it may be a while before you actually see those dollars, but we are confident that that will happen someday. And the election will certainly play a huge part in all of this.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, I'm wondering with that long explanation, were there any proposals that we had that won't be moving through?
Boardwalks for Beavers.
Okay, thank you.
Our third, the Boardwalks for Beavers project didn't really get any traction this year, which
That's
is
correct. Yeah.
perfectly okay because the ones that are really important and are funding current initiatives are moving forward. So,
Thank you. I didn't understand which one they were talking, so thanks.
sorry, we put forward the Community Violence Reduction Initiative. We put forward 702, I think, was our ask, 702,000. We put forward the airport terminal improvements, a second phase. And I don't remember. I think was it more than, it was 2.1 or something?
2.1 million.
That's
Oh my
okay.
God, stunning that I pulled that out.
Yes, you-
And then the other one was the Boardwalks for Beavers project, and that one was more around design and initial construction dollars, not very big and didn't really go well.
Great, again.
That one was our stretch, like if you're applying to college, that was our Harvard MIT. So.
Okay.
And that's been kind of our theory on this all along is to probably request one more project than we're really going to have a chance to get, because if we get lucky and we get the additional project, great. And if we don't and we end up with, the lower number, that's totally fine as well. And we also just want to, because this is going to come down to decisions being made by staff and by the members of Congress, kind of whatever catches their fancy and attention, and also whatever fits in with the other requests that they have kind of out there. So we want to kind of give a buffet kind of possible projects and possible requests that we can have out there so that we can kind of meet our delegation really kind of wherever they are with our projects and with our requests.
And Mark, if I may, just for a moment, I want to just say that having Summit help us through this has been immeasurable. I think in terms of our success, you can see it in how our grants are turning a lot more quickly and a lot more positively of late, but Front Street, for example. And you can also see it in the way we advanced these appropriations really carefully. So we were shopping them as early as, I think it was last September, it might have been earlier, and crafting and building and shaping based on the feedback we were getting. And then at the very last minute, some of the House rules were a little bit different than last year, and we were able to adapt and get heads up early so that we could build successful appropriation requests. So I just want to take a quick minute and say thank you, Mark, Terry, and Kat, for their support, and thank you, Mayor Hoy, for being our emissary, if you will, over there with all of the agency heads and advancing our priorities. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I was lucky enough to be able to join a Zoom call day before yesterday with the president and with a bunch of other Democratic mayors. And he sort of doubled down on his support of cities and belief in mayors and his continued efforts to try to get money directly to us. So yeah, I think we're in good shape that way, and so much better than ever before, thanks to our friends at Summit. Justin, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just to piggyback on Courtney's comments, it's not just the advocacy side, but it's also these guys' relationships with the Oregon congressional delegation. So not only are they pushing for things, but when our delegation has questions or their staff, they know that they can go to these guys, and that presence is really important, just to piggyback on these. And then if I may, Mr. Mayor, while I got you guys on, you know, June and July in Oregon are very slow with the exception of campaign stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my update. My question for you guys, as I'm out there kind of gleaning what the, you know, the swing seats are and where the races are going to be here in Oregon, are you guys hearing anything from the delegation or anything on the national front that we don't see in the news that starts to talk about maybe down ticket races and what's going on in the Democratic Party now? And if you can share anything with that, you or Terry or Kat, that would be great, because you know, I'm out on the ground trying to figure that out now.
There's only a thing or two controversial going on at the moment.
No, it's a good question, Justin. Thank you. Oregon, and I would say the Northwest and the Portland media market is very much at the center of what everyone talks about. They're talking about control of the U.S. House in the next Congress. And there have been major buys and reservations made on ad buys and things like that in the Portland market. You have what I think is going to be perhaps the most expensive race in the country just over the river, with Marie Gluesenkamp Perez running for re-election after her freshman year. That's the third most Republican seat held by a Democrat right now. The most Republican one is a seat in Alaska, which I think is part of why it will not be the most expensive. Alaska is just a lot cheaper to buy ads in and do what you need to do than Portland media market. And then you have on the other side of the aisle, you have the 5th CD, which stops, you know, kind of right at the border of Salem on the eastern edge, with Lori Chavez DeRemer running against Janelle Bynum. And that's shaping out to be, I think, again, one of the most expensive races on the Republican side when it comes to trying to unseat a sitting Republican member of Congress. The other two freshman congressional races in Oregon, I think, also are getting a fair amount of attention. Both of them, Andrea Salinas and Val Hoyle, are on the frontline list of kind of the members who are considered most endangered by the Democratic Campaign Committee, and who are therefore, you know, most kind of in line for funding from both the committee and when they're trying to get donors in order to kick money into those races. Val Hoyle was just added to that list, I think just a few weeks ago. So and they usually expand the list to include kind of additional members as they go through the whole process there. So Salinas also very much, I think, in the mix there, what people are talking about, I think definitely well below Chavez DeRemer and Gluesenkamp Perez when it comes to kind of what races are most up in the air. And I think I don't think anyone really knows what to think on really either of those races. I think the Gluesenkamp Perez one, again, is much more Republican. And I think if it were a different nominee, if it were, for example, Jamie Herrera Butler, who held the seat before, it would be a slam dunk to switch back from blue to red. I think, you know, given her opponent, it could be much more. It could be she could have an easier chance of getting it through. Her fundraising, Gluesenkamp Perez has been incredible, and she's been doing a really great job on that side. And similarly, Chavez DeRemer has been, I think, performing very well also, again, with fundraising, with her campaigning, with kind of how she's been positioning herself during her time in Congress, has been doing a good job trying to kind of thread the needle of what's kind of nominally a Democratic seat. So, yeah, I think those races are in a lot of ways going to be key to the House as a whole. Like if they all go in one direction, you know, that will say something for sure, kind of about what happens with the House at large. It's a very narrow margin for the U.S. House overall, and you know, small things can make a big difference. And as Terry said, some relatively small things are being discussed right now. You know, just like changing nominees in July. which will have implications that I don't think any of us could really pretend to know exactly what that might mean down the road.
And Glusenkamp Perez is one of the folks who has called for Biden to step aside. I think that there's something to the idea that they're letting some of these people in really tough seats make these comments without, you're not seeing that leadership come down on them in any way. I don't know if that's because leadership isn't sure what to do, or they feel that maybe it's okay for her to say that because that helps her in her race. It's going to be a chaotic several months until the election, so hold on to your seat.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. We're just trying to gauge what, how that could impact stuff here in Oregon. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, I think the biggest impact for all of you is going to be, you're going to be all seeing a lot of ads for the next like 3+ months.
Daytime
that'll
TV
be
daytime TV here is nothing but Glusenkamp Perez's ads.
Yeah.
Like she's just all over our TV.
I noticed that when I was at my parents' place too. It was a lot of her everywhere, and I think it's just going to build and everywhere else, because all of them have so much money and there's so much outside money. They're going to be spamming you with internet ads, and on anything you can possibly get, you're going to be getting an ad, I think, for some of these races. So I think that'll be the biggest impact for you all. But it's I would expect a lot of relatively high profile, even though Oregon at the presidential level is not really considered a swing state, I would expect high profile campaign surrogates, people like that, coming to Oregon, just because there's so much of importance on the House side right there in a relatively small geographic region.
Thank you. I think Keith has a comment or a question.
Yeah, Mark or Terry, do we know anything about our NOAA grant for the dam replacement, the Bennett Dam replacement?
We have not heard anything on that yet, and I've been trying to get a sense of when the expected award date would be, and I have not seen that either. So okay, we'll step up our efforts there, just try and get a sense of when they're expecting to announce.
That's a big one for us. What are we looking for there?
We are looking for 25 million.
Yep.
They like to evaluate those kind of on their own. In the past, when we've made inquiries, it hasn't really been appreciated.
They kind of stick to themselves.
Yeah.
NOAA does not like talking to other people. Like
exactly.
when you reach out to them, they almost seem to be like, why are you talking to me? What is this about?
They're scientists.
I have science
Exactly.
over here to pay attention to. Yeah, it's a lovely way to be, but less forthcoming with
Visions, yeah.
You think they're gonna make a decision based on science
Yes.
and data?
Yes.
They're now.
Can you believe that?
Until Chevron really kicks in.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
I should say
Yeah,
Chevron.
thank you, everybody, for your comments and your continued advocacy for the city. Any final questions or thoughts for our federal agenda?
Thanks, guys. I'll keep you. I know you guys have another thing, so I'll just send anything that comes up. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Absolutely, thank you. And the last thing I was going to mention, although Courtney referred to as well, that happened since our last one, is the Front Street Raise grant, which we're all very excited about, and we've thanked the delegation for their advocacy on your behalf as well for that successful grant application. But that's an exciting one, and I think the folks in the delegation are very excited about that project and that potential development. So hopefully more to come on that front in the future.
Yeah, that was a first time application, which is sort of puts McGilchrist to shame.
Yeah, these can take a long time, so it was nice to see for sure.
Yeah.
And just like McGilchrist, I think that we will be pushing Front Street redevelopment as a continual ask.
Right.
Because the need is going to be so fairly extensive, and it'll be multi-year award.
I saw on social media somewhere, maybe on Threads, where Secretary Buttigieg was in Salem with doing some sort of boardwalk or some sort of connection. I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, and it was, of course, a different Salem. But it was.
Why didn't you know about
I know,
this?
but it was very similar to what I'm hoping for along the waterfront in ours. So I thought that's a really good sign that they are funding those kinds of connectors and paths and things. So anyway, that kind of gave me a little bit of a start for a second.
Do you know which Salem it turned out to be? There are like 26.
I can't remember which one it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had the exact same thought, Mayor, when I saw that. I was like, how did I miss this? The
Yeah.
secretary is in Salem. How am I this like out of the loop? And then I felt a lot better when I realized that.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Our friends at DOT would have gotten an earful if they didn't tell us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks too, Mark, for the trick where you just wear a tie on Friday and tell everybody you got something else to go to.
Yeah, that's
I'm
on
gonna
you.
get that one.
Yeah. You're on mute. You're on mute.
So I've got shorts on. I'll just, be stepping out and playing golf.
Yeah, sweet trick. All right, thank you.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Justin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll get us back on time. Today I'm just gonna talk about what I've been up to in terms of meetings, some important meetings I've got coming up. As you can see from our agenda, the meat of our meeting is really talking about our legislative agenda. So with that, the meetings I've had recently, Representative Anderson had a good 15-minute conversation on the phone, talking about all sorts of stuff. I'll get more into that.
You had a 15-minute conversation.
Oh, it might have been 10 minutes or so, but again, a split conversation. It's campaign season, so we're gonna have policy discussions and then we switch hats and have some of those conversations. Next, I went to the Senator Wagner and Senate Democratic Leadership Fund golf event last week. Very fun. Got to see a lot of members and, just continually put on the radar how much we need going into the next session. Had a wonderful half-hour sit down with Senator Lieber. As everybody knows, former majority leader who is now moving to co-chair Ways and Means. So it's going to be great to have her in there. I'd say two things occurred quite a bit in all of these meetings. As I just discussed concepts, because we don't have a official legislative agenda yet, we've got our framework, but as I discuss concepts, I bring up pilot. We bring up statewide pilot, the initial reaction is always or a head shake. We bring up Salem specific pilot in terms of a capital district or some kind of public enhancement, public safety enhancement. Everybody seems to say per person, that sounds like a good idea. They get the fact that it's our officers obviously getting pepper sprayed. It's us coordinating the protests. It's us coordinating rallies. It's working with OSP and doing all that. So feedback has been really positive. And the State Street public safety enhancement has been really positive. The other thing that's super positive to a person, everybody seems to love Brett Haynes. So,
Yeah.
and I've really enjoyed working with Brett. So we go in there together with Brett next session. I think we've got some good opportunities and I know things have been working really well and we'll talk about that.
You still have an email from Brian Martin today?
Yeah, I saw it this morning.
Okay, great.
So I'm encouraged by that and that's the general kind of overall sense. Yes.
This is background on the State Street
I just was
idea.
wondering who that person was.
Brett is the facilities manager for the Capitol.
Okay.
So,
Oh, okay.
so staff have been working with Brett and the architects for the capital project. And what we've been doing is meeting frequently to be on the street and figure out how to make everything fit. So what the state is after is a greater security perimeter for the Capitol and reducing the number of entrance points from 17 to 2.
Interesting.
And so we've been trying to figure out how to allow both that security perimeter as well as the future two-way of State Street, the both way bike lanes and sidewalk improvements, how all of that fits, including the parking and other elements. And so we've come to a really good, solid understanding of the challenge and how we can make it all work. And that's with Brett now. And so he's going to be advancing that. And this comes back to the $2 million allocation for a State Street solution for security. And that's from last session. So this is the last step we need to do to have that advance.
So somewhat related to that, when I was at DOJ, which is on State Street, DAS had expressed a long-term interest in making some changes. The Robertson building is at State and 12, across from Adams Rib. That our team had to basically leave that building because it's dilapidated, the HVAC wasn't working, it was either freezing cold or people were sweltering in their offices. The building I was in, which is Commerce Building, the squatty little building right next door to it on the train tracks on 12. It had a major flood not long after I left DOJ, and I left in January of 23. And they had to evacuate that building. They weren't able to work inside of that building for months. Everyone went right back to full-time remote. So those buildings are sick. And I don't know if the DAS still is interested in doing all of that, but I'm just wondering if the planets are aligning because they're taking a look at those buildings and the serious structural issues that they have right there, right off State Street. So just an aside.
Well, I can tell you that as in my role as chair of the Capital Planning Commission, and right now is the time when we're reviewing all of the capital requests that are coming from state agencies as they prepare for the upcoming session. So we've heard from the School for the Blind, which has a huge need. Yesterday, we heard from DPSST, which has an expansion need, and we heard from Forestry, which is trying to preserve their historic building on State Street. And then we also heard from DAS about the Labor and Industries building. That's their next big thing. That's the building that's just to the north of the library on the Capitol Mall, the one that's mostly glass, kind of with the dark pane glass, that window.
It is.
Kind of, they're getting ready to do a whole seismic retrofit and redo of that building. They're hoping to. This is all contingent on funding, of course. But right now, that building has an average occupancy of about 200 people a day. And their plan is to take it to 900 a day, and then but to be able to accommodate up to 2,700 employees through post-pandemic work sharing kind of workstation sharing and all that kind of stuff. So they are under a mandate, DAS is under a mandate from the governor to reduce their footprint. And they're not contemplating reducing any state-owned buildings, but they are reducing their state leases. So, and coming back and consolidating into state-owned buildings. So you're gonna see a lot of that around coming up over the next few years as they try to.
That will have an impact on our general fund.
Right.
Yep,
Right.
that's a good thing for us. To have them come back downtown.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. I
They-
mean, it's,
We get proceeds from leases when the state does lease things. We
Right.
do not
Got it,
get
got it.
property tax when they own. And
they're not looking to buy.
Yes, but if they pull back from leases.
Right.
We will have a
Less.
greater impact on our general fund.
Interesting.
So anyway, just to let you know what the kind of the state of the landscape is out there, and they're doing a lot of work. That looks like that's the next big thing, and they're really working at repopulating the Capitol Mall buildings and bringing a lot of workers back.
They're doing that and that at the Department of Ag building too.
I heard a little bit about that as well yesterday. So anyway,
Which strengthens the need for public safety enhancement.
It
right,
does.
that's why I kind of wanted
There
to
you go.
seem topical with all that.
That's perfect.
So.
Yeah.
So Justin, can you tell me how, so what you're hearing is if funding that comes from the state is for public safety, how is that different, or how can that be sort of labeled versus pilot? I'm just trying to understand how,
It's a targeted pilot essentially.
Yeah.
So
It's a pilot with a specific.
purpose.
Capital district, which is defined in statute already, so I think we have some opportunity
Okay.
there. So we saw some gun legislation, 21, I believe, that define the capital as a district. People do understand the need, they understand that we help enhance that over there.
They
Other-
want it specifically.
Specifically, that gets out of that statewide pilot, which would, that's a major undertaking, right? That's like taking on a year 5 and 50 or.
That's what
taking on a sales
differentiates
tax or.
That's what differentiates us from other cities, and that's what we need to be able to do, so they don't have to fund every place their
Every
state
municipality.
property. Right.
And our pitch is really police and fire.
Yes. And so, when I say public safety,
Right, I
Brian-
know
Brian,
we're
Steve.
giving a lot of examples of police, but we're also interested in pitching.
Our only fire fatality in the whole history of the Salem Fire Department was at the Capitol. When it burned.
thank you.
And Keith comes from a state where other capital cities do get funding. Albany, New York, Trenton, New Jersey, Olympia, Washington. So we're doing the research on this to make sure we know exactly how many cities, what those numbers look like. I think it's 1.4 in Olympia,
It's 1.7 when I left, so it's probably closer to 2 now.
2 now. Okay. So those are kind of the numbers we're trying to base. You look at Albany, it's like 12 million. New Jersey, it's like 9 million, but obviously a lot more people, so.
Chris and I have been to protests at the Capitol where there were some really scary safety situations with people carrying guns and infiltrating and peaceful protests and. Yeah, still remember that. That was pretty scary stuff. So
Yeah.
there's lots of real world examples to choose from.
Yeah, and in my meetings, I mean, people really understand that need, and I think that's good. So we're probably gonna attack that
Right?
once we get approvals with specific legislation. Again, we'll try up front with an actual bill, which I'm not a huge fan of, especially when it comes to taxation, but we will do that. We've got some benefits too, in looking at the politics of our electeds, right? These are good for them. They're good in swing districts. As we know, some of our Senate districts are on the outskirts or in a little bit of a swing, so that would be good politics there. So I think things are aligning. And again, the relationship we've had with Brad has been really good and him wanting to do that. And those construction funds are there, so we can get kind of crafty. We will have to figure out how much it should, but how much we should be compensated for in terms of giving that up in a period of a lease of how long that looks. So we're working on that. I didn't mean to get sidetracked on that, Courtney, but that's great. So. And then, as everybody knows, I met with Rep. Fahey and reported on that in my last meeting, but again, no blowback there. Totally understand where you're coming from, Justin. Just let me know how it's going with Brett and keep us up to speed. So, this past week I did a little Central Oregon swing, met with Representative Krupp, and that was great. Spent about a half hour with him. As everybody knows, we haven't been able to do this retail lobbying with the pandemic with the last couple cycles. So I'm really working hard to get back out, get in people's districts and have a nice conversation where you're not rushed. They've got a meeting waiting or they're 2 meetings behind and just really have these conversations. My next meeting was with Anthony Broadman, and if folks aren't familiar with Anthony, he's a tribal attorney that works for the Cow Creek tribe and is running for the Senate in the Tim Knope seat, which is really trending Democratic. I think it's almost a 7-8% registration edge now without the Knope name and him not being able to run. It was one of the most expensive Senate races last cycle, and Knope barely won 4 years ago. So even if he was an incumbent running, that would be a tough seat for the Republicans to hold. So I would expect Anthony Broadman to be the next senator from that area. He's got a good understanding. He's a city councilor in Bend, understands what's going on with cities. So keep an eye on that race. And that race, if Gorsuch holds in Gresham and Dick Anderson wins on the coast, those are kind of 3 that are in play this cycle. That would get the Senate to 18, so super majority again. So keep an eye on that. Met with Representative Emerson Levy, who's in a really tough race. She won like 50.3% of the vote last time. It was super narrow. And again, presidential election, you would think the reason why I asked the question of our federal team is like, now it's just about turnout. And some D's gonna be like, no, it's just Biden and not inspired to turn out. I hope not. That shouldn't be the case. And looking historically at how our districts have performed, I don't think that'll be the case, but we need to be aware of it and look at these.
Question?
I'm sorry.
Which district is Emerson Levy's?
She's kind of right. It used to be, it's kind of that carve out. It's kind of, it can go either way. Republic. So it picks up Sun River and picks up more of that.
Okay, Central Oregon.
Central Oregon. This whole trip was Central Oregon.
Can't say I have those committed to memory, so thank you.
Well, and it's hard for us too, redistricting every time. It's like numbers come at you, you do this and that. The next meeting was Mike McLean. You guys might remember, representative from the past. He's now running for the Senate over there. So that's a big guaranteed win over there for them. And then I met with Brian Emerson, who, Dan knows is just a campaign operative and a Republican operative, just trying to glean information on what those races look like and how they move forward. My upcoming meetings, I've got a sit down with the Senate president on July 17th. And I let him know that we had to have a conversation, and so I did not take that goodwill with me to the Democratic event. I had some other funds there. So that'll be an important meeting, so I'll make sure to report back to Courtney on how that goes. It should be good. I'm also working with his office on some other issues, and it seems to be going okay. So I'm looking forward to that on the 17th. On the 23rd, I'm meeting with our other co-chair, Representative Thomas Sanchez. That'll be great. We'll go over this. You're very aware of our position on what we're trying to do this next legislative session. And then on Monday, I know we've got a League of Cities meeting that they're starting to put together their priorities for this next session. It'll be interesting to hear a couple things. Sheltering, where the funds are going to be coming from. This decision in Grants Pass, how that's going to impact everybody when it comes to homelessness, et cetera. So we'll be on for that.
And they lost one of their more significant lobbyists.
Ariel's gone, which is a real bummer, because I don't, you know.
Wait, she's
I don't know.
gone?
She went to Hillsborough.
She went to Hillsborough.
Which is ultimately good for us, but the league will be down a really significant asset around housing and homelessness amongst other priorities, so that will be hard for the league.
And those are two big laws. I mean, Ariel, of course, I mean, she's just really wonderful and very talented. And then losing Erin Doyle she went to Beaverton, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or Washington County, one of the,
Washington.
so losing those two, you know, they were a pretty strong team, so.
And they are also joining some mid-sized cities that we have good relationships with.
So that'll be good. So they'll have a good knowledge of what some of our goals and objectives are. Okay, key priorities that we're gonna talk about those here in a minute, Courtney, so I won't go into those. Obviously, everybody knows sheltering, affordable housing, State Street, we talked about that a little bit, pilot specific to Salem and or Capital District. And then what I'm hearing from every representative in these conversations and every senator coming in is they really think it's gonna be a transportation session, and let's start working on this. And Lindsay's reached out to us to talk to the city about some things at ODOT, so moving down that road. And then finally, I think, as everybody knows, August, especially for our federal folks, everybody's out of there then, everybody's kind of getting their summer on. And then right after Labor Day, it is full on campaign mode. You can tell by their comments how much money that one campaign must have that they're running ads so early in the process. You usually keep your powder dry until after Labor Day, right? To maximize it. When you got the money, you might as well buy it up. Which also makes other races really expensive too, right? Because you're all crowding in for airtime during a presidential campaign. Now Oregon isn't a state, right? So we're not relevant in the big presidential race, but those down tickets certainly have that.
We still like to talk about
It's politics. I love talking politics. I don't get to do it with you guys, so. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Council. and
Thank
staff.
you.
Yeah.
All right, we are now on to our proposed legislative agenda. This is a holdover from last meeting. Did everybody get a chance to take a look and prepare any thoughts?
I can draw everyone to the primary changes, there are track changes again for your benefit. On page 2, we did update the airport name, that was an action that council has recently taken, thank you so much. And you'll notice the interest is really in the master planning work that we envisioned, including some work with Oregon Department of Aviation in that role. And then you'll be able to see another edit on page 3 where we're talking about transportation funding, back to Justin's point. We don't think it's big transportation projects. We think it's just trying to make the transportation funding work better to cover operations and maintenance for everyone, including ODOT. And then you'll see on the page 4, we've updated the public safety topic. And again, public safety answering points are 911 call centers. At the top of page 5, you'll see a little bit more detail on public safety. And then when you get to page 8, you'll start to encounter a laundry list of things that we think we might want to pursue grants or appropriations for. And that's just a list that helps us be ready when we see opportunities, and just wanting to make sure we have alignment on that broader list of priorities. So those are the things that I would take input suggestions. The goal again would be to try to advance out of the legislative committee a complete set for now, and then forward that to council for their approval. And this really just gives us some leverage as Justin continues his conversations, as we continue to look for grants and other
Are you
opportunities.
looking at our first August meeting, or are you kind of giving on for the last July meeting?
I don't, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay,
I
I just want to know what our goal was, so we can try and hit it.
My goal would just be advancing out of committee today if we could, and then docketing as early as possible. And also just please be aware that it's a living, breathing document. And so as we want to make changes, we can do so and advance that again to council for their approval. It's a long session, so long haul.
Did anybody have any thoughts on this?
Yes, actually, I see it's in here, the COPS funding that we had talked about, Courtney. Did you wanna
I'd
fill
like
the
to-
others in?
Yeah, so, and Kevin, heads up. So there is a piece of legislation that is designed to increase the budget for the COPS grants. Those are community oriented policing strategies, just COPS, or something, community oriented something. But just so there is a piece of legislation that would give that more dollars. Do note that it's tied up in the whole appropriations conversation you heard about earlier, so it may or may not advance, and if it did advance, it may not influence available resources because the appropriations are taking a lot of time. The only other thing to note about COPS grants is generally they give you kind of seed money for an officer, and then an expectation that you continue to hold that officer position. That's a little challenging for us, has been historically, traditionally, and I'm sure Trevin can speak to it more. So while the program is great, and certainly we can lend our support for, if you wish to advance that bill forward, it wouldn't give Salem right now in our fiscal position, it wouldn't give us a lot of advantage.
Okay.
It wouldn't be something that we would chase after just right now. We are pursuing, I feel like there are, and that's in the grant table, I feel like there are 4 or 5 different, 9, thank you. Different grants that we are pursuing for community violence reduction and the trust building initiative and a bunch of other areas. So we are pursuing grant funding to further the council and the community's priorities. We're just being careful about the commitments that we may or may not be able to sustain.
Well, thank you for looking into that. That makes total sense.
Do you want to say anything else?
We use the COPS grants for our community service officers or non-sworn. Every year we go for that, and I think we get $600,000. It basically pays for all of those officers. When I looked a little deeper into the bill, it was to enhance the pool of money for COPS grants, not necessarily to increase what the individual agencies would be able to receive. So it ends up working out to about, over the course of 3 years, a little bit, it would pay for less than half of an officer. So it's only a subsidy, and then it makes it difficult because it can't supplant funding, so we couldn't fill current vacancies with that funding. So I think the mayor, Mr. Mayor, when he went back and talked to COPS, and what we've talked with Summit was trying to start to push on what the process is for utilizing the COPS grants to make it more for supplanting budget deficits or for current vacancies as well, not just when you're fully staffed that you get to add on. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, Trevin and the chief and I have met with the folks at COPS a couple of times, and it's been the different pots of money and the processes there is, very federal. Very federal, very convoluted. And we tried to help advocate to make it more user friendly from the city perspective to where, because they have entire pots of money, which they rarely get applicants for because they're so narrow and convoluted on who can qualify and who can use it. And then they have others where they get tons of applicants. So it's really, I think, it's a sign that the federal government doesn't really understand how cities work a lot of time. And so that's what I think they're trying to be more responsive to that. And so it's a process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
So I think that there might have been some interest in proposing some changes to the policy statements. I saw some movement at that end of the table. Would you all be able to speak to those?
Sure.
So you're talking about policy and not necessarily priorities, or which one? Oh, I'm on page 8. Is that okay to jump there? Okay.
This is your.
We're doing the whole document, so we gotta start somewhere.
I was okay with the changes made, at 1 through 7. But on 8, I am wondering about updating some of this because, well, for instance, we have Winter Maple family friendly bikeway listed twice on here, and I didn't know. We have it called out as a separate project on the 3rd bullet point under bike and ped.
Yes.
It's a $20 million project. And then it's also in the 1st bullet point, and so.
I think it's because we're looking at 2 different target buckets, but I'm not positive. Or it could just be a mistake.
Do you see what we're talking about? Safe streets.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a living list, and so, yeah.
So I was wondering, because we already got the grant for the planning for Vision Zero and the implementation of the 20 is plenty. I'm wondering if we just need to update this whole bullet point to maybe talk about implementation of the Vision Zero plan that we already got grant funding for the planning part, but not the implementation. And then also consider adding in the traffic management plan, the neighborhood traffic management plan that is really popular with our neighborhoods, but we don't know how to fund those requests. So I'm wondering if that could be tied into this as we move through getting grants for things and then move on to the next cycle. And I know that the Winter Maple Bikeway is just becoming more and more expensive.
Yes, when I saw that one.
Yeah, because we're really having just a breakdown of the actual concrete on these old streets.
So there's probably the worst street.
That
Yeah.
20 million does not include the repavement of the street.
Oh, dear God.
And the 20 million is a couple of years old, so
Yes.
I
So-
would assume that, I think, but that was when we were developing the bond measure, that was the package of things
Yeah.
that was estimated, and you probably would not apply for a grant to do all of it at once.
Okay.
Let's look at
Yeah,
elements.
so I was just wondering if maybe that one needs to be re-looked at.
You do some cleanup there.
Can I just come back to, sorry, so what I would like to do with the first bullet then is just instead change it so that it's about implementing Vision 00 plan and the neighborhood traffic management plan.
Yep.
And
And then,
eliminate the after the semicolon.
yes,
Yeah.
and then on the Maple Winter Bikeway, I wonder if I think my intent with including the dollars was to have it understood that this was super big. But I wonder if we should just take the dollars out for this purpose.
Yeah, because we're talking about priorities here. We're not talking about, to me, it's more of a concept than a specific.
Well, and maybe you can help me understand, say this next thing, because the Maple Winter Bikeway, which I think it should be winter.
It is, we always call it
Maple
winter
winter,
maple,
but,
not maple winter.
That is part of the Oregon bicycle,
Well, I'm Valley Scenic Bikeway,
thank you.
yes.
And I wonder if, what parts of that go through Salem, where is that trail and how is its infrastructure overall as it travels through Salem? And I know that this is probably the worst part of it. No, other parts?
River Road, that's
So-
really expensive.
Yes.
And
And we have that on the slide thing, but anyway, that was just a thought that I had, because I know that this is a part of something bigger. That I wonder if it's a policy, do we need to start at the bigger instead of down at the minute? Does that make sense to anybody else but me? Sorry.
Absolutely. Questions, so thank you for.
Okay, good. And then on page 9, under state priorities, for bike and ped infrastructure, we only have the West Passenger Rail study. And I wonder if there are other opportunities for us to get state funding for some of these projects instead of just federal. I know federal funding comes with a hell of a lot more strings attached, and so I wonder if there isn't space to elaborate on what we could get there.
I'm not sure where you're at.
Oh,
So
sorry.
underneath the state
State
priorities,
Right
Sure.
here. Yeah, there's, I can pen, there's just one bullet point there.
and I think that probably just, we know that West is gonna be more of a statewide influenceable issue than some of the others, so maybe we should not discern between the two, would it be easier if we were just talking about a broad list of priorities?
for biking.
instead of trying
Yeah.
to differentiate between something that would be likely more federal versus state. Is that
And I don't think,
helpful?
in terms of the West study, I don't really think we need to call that out because I'm not sure there's gonna be any legislation this time. So,
Yeah, the more it goes, that kind of, I actually picked up the phone and called the railroad folks. Just to see what they were gonna do, if you were gonna be opposed. They said, we're not gonna be opposed, but we're not gonna be super enthusiastic. We'll sit at a work group table and we'll be part of the discussions, but. They don't really see it happening, so, but they're not actively opposing. That being said, I think it's a pretty big lift to your point.
yeah, based on our first meeting. I say we put our efforts elsewhere.
Okay, so I'm taking that off.
Yeah.
And then the
We
question,
can always change it if somehow there's some big new energy. or
Well,
whatever.
Does it just need to change that, I mean, to your point, I think, not getting down to the details of a project, and maybe this is a mute point, but maybe we just say that we encourage
Yeah,
multimodal transportation projects that connect Salem to neighboring cities or to the metro area or whatever it is, so that we can be maybe just a little bit
Yeah.
more vague, but still pro for
I guess,
poised for.
because there are some other options being discussed.
Yeah, and then I just have one more on page 10. Top one of the transportation bullet point, it talks about the rail study and design for Front Street. Just updating that to reflect the RAISE grant and whether we need to kind of pivot now to phase 2 and how we adjust as we move forward with that project. That's it, that's all I got.
backing up just real quick on the policy statement about encouraging connection to Salem. Other modes, and other communities, is there a place for us to put that in the broader policy statements is my question. Do we want to put it in economic development?
We don't have a transportation section?
Well, the only transportation is bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So do we want to maybe change that? Like, or do you want to keep pedestrian and bike as a separate one over other rail or street or whatever?
I don't know. We have transportation as a funding problem, not as a
Oh, that's where it is.
policy area. I had the same question.
Yeah,
We have road and air right below it. so-
Right.
well, that's fascinating. City manager, do you have thoughts on this?
There you go.
I'll put something in economic development that will talk about some kind of alternate mode connection with other communities for now.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering here, Courtney, we say road and air transportation, maybe road could be more of a could be road rail and, something that could incorporate.
What page are you?
Page 8.
Like page 8,
Third section down.
just below bicycle.
I mean, you could just replace that with multimodal.
Yeah.
Transportation.
That makes more sense.
I have a feeling we included air to
Oh,
Yeah.
talk about our airport or something. which is-
Well, we have,
Airport is called.
we were talking about the earlier pages,
And
right?
we do have several things that are air, so I like air being in there, but I'm just wondering if we could title that slightly different and include the rail efforts.
okay.
If I can switch gears, I don't see affordable housing identified as a federal priority. And under state priorities on page 9, the caption does read sheltering programs and affordable housing, but the two bullet points are not affordable housing. So I think it would be helpful for us to call that out specifically. And I do have, like Virginia, I have thoughts, and I'm hoping you know how to translate that into more effective words here. We have our Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. We recently voted to use 3 million of that in our most recent council meeting. So we will have no problem spending that money, I suspect. Sometimes we provide just a little bit of money, as you all know, we provide a little bit of money to take that project over the finish line, and that's great. And so us having those kinds of funds come directly to us to support other projects that are run, operated, and owned and managed by other people, that's been really effective. We've done that for Center for Hope and Safety, we've done that for Community Action and so on. So that would be one type of funding that comes directly to a city. But I've also seen our community partners do amazing things with the OHCS money. And that, you know, I don't know if that means do we write letters of support for that? But when other nonprofit partners come up with affordable housing projects, even if we haven't committed a single dollar, we benefit enormously because it's more people off the streets, it's less public safety issues, less park staff, et cetera, et cetera. So that isn't money that would necessarily come to us, but we benefit when those projects come to Salem, and those OHCS dollars are very competitive. We've gotten 2 project turnkey projects in Salem, and that's a real credit to those nonprofits or community action agency. So I don't know how we would articulate that as a legislative priority or not, but I just noticed when they do well, we do well. It's kind of my bottom line.
We do have affordable housing listed, and it's the 3rd bullet down on page 9.
Under policy areas.
Yeah, I do, but I just don't see actual affordable where does affordable
3rd
housing?
bullet down on number 9.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just in terms of those other projects, I write letters of support for those projects all the time.
Right.
Dan kind of coordinates that with the
Uh-huh.
various departments, so the only time I hesitate is if it's during a session and it's a project that's directly competing with one of our specific asks.
Sure.
At the last session, I said no to 2 different letters because literally the last days of the session, everybody was going for the same pot of money, and I felt like I didn't want to send a mixed message saying, we've got to have this for the city. Oh, and then I'm supporting this one over here and this one over here.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the only time I've said no, but usually we are always sending letters of support for community action, for United Way, all sorts of, you know, Center for Open Safety. Chariots, yeah, I mean, I'm sending lots of letters of support for those various applications.
So you don't think you think these priorities as is do enough to convey our support for affordable housing in the area?
I feel like they do.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Thank you. So are you generally collectively feeling comfortable advancing this to council? Would you like more time with it?
I think we need I'm sorry to say this, but I think we need another look after, because there's some substantial changes today suggested. I feel like we need one more look.
Excellent. We will do that then at our August convening of the legislative committee. There's one more thing that I wanted to make sure, and unfortunately we've run out of time, but I wanted to make sure that you all had seen the talking points and the proposal you had asked when we last got together about transportation funding. There had been some interest in engaging Elizabeth to develop sort of a communication plan, and you all have that in your packets. And I wondered if there was anything else that you wanted to do with that. This to me would also be something that we would invite the full council to approve of the city taking this kind of a position. So would you like to hold off on this or send this separately?
I don't feel like we need to approve it. I think they're just talking points. I feel like they could just go out to council, can't they? Why would they need to be approved?
Because there's also a direct plea to residents to advocate for this as well.
Yes, that's.
And I had a slight, I just wanted to make sure that we were using the city's voice in a way that was okay with the majority of council.
But we're using our individual elected officials' voice. That's what I thought the purpose of them was.
Okay.
Which doesn't need I mean, everybody can choose to use them or not. I guess unless my thinking is, most people have different thinking.
So when I got that, and I spoke with you a little bit about it, I had I began preparing an email to send that information to, because it is a call to action for citizens to write in. And I was preparing an email with all of that information to my neighborhood associations so that they could then share it amongst their members. I hadn't completed it yet because I was like, is the city also wanting to sort of promote that? Or am I doing it individually? You know, I was trying to understand what my role was while I shared it to the neighborhood associations and to their members. I mean, even beyond in the sense of like, how would that go? Because what we're asking them to do is, you know, write in with or somehow let their legislators know.
I don't think that this, I mean, I guess my perception was this is a political issue and not a
Call to action.
not a city issue, so to me, it's up to us and not
Okay,
the staff. I felt like Elizabeth was just helping us craft some points. I don't know, maybe I'm.
Where's points? Are they?
oh,
They're in the email.
they're in the.
Oh, I'm
They're
sorry.
not in the.
And Elizabeth sent it out.
Oh, okay.
And I included it in what I sent out to you for this meeting.
I mean, she did a great job, but I was just like, I wasn't quite sure how to include all of that and to whom I should be discussing it.
Yeah, Julie,
I know that I had talked to Elizabeth when she was working on this and she had questions about, so who is the audience? And so that's where up front it has sort of, there's actually two different audiences. One is just, the first page is really just speaking points that council members could use talking to your, community members. And then the second page is more messages requesting that support of like, hey, let's contact our state legislators and do this. So there's sort of two different levels there, and I think maybe it's up to the counselors and the mayor whether they want to go to that second level or keep it at the first level. This builds on the information that was provided last month, that was just sort of some bullets, probably more of a frequently asked questions type format about some of the funding discussions. And so she just was trying to figure out who the audience was. So if we got the audiences wrong, that can also be changed.
Yeah, that's right.
and the idea I think that we were asking for was so just so we have some consistency amongst the nine of us. So we're all speaking kind of from the
Same voice, yes.
Yeah, but I don't feel like it's something that needs approval.
Okay, well, I
You can
think
change it as you like.
I'll probably ask Elizabeth to separate that out. To separate the two different asks, because that's where I was struggling. Do I send this whole packet? Because I can't, when I get it, it's in a PDF and I can't separate it.
Oh,
And so I was just trying to understand, who am I sending this to? Who am I gonna be talking to and how? So maybe I just need to have it separated. So I can ask that.
Yeah, and I think I think this was written to be sort of talking points as opposed to an email. So if you want something, maybe if she just provides it in Word, then you can take the points that you think are relevant.
Exactly.
And I have a meeting with her next week, so I'll do that then. There's no rush. But there are some meetings coming up in July.
There are next week are the
that's right.
the only meetings that are
They're all in
relatively
July.
close to us are
That's
next Tuesday and Wednesday on the back side of the sheet.
Yeah, I felt like we were asking for the 9 of us to have talking points when we're interacting with people.
Yes.
And this is more of like, it has that, but then it's also this other component that is more of like a political rallying type
Yes.
thing, which I don't think we're coordinated enough to pull off. And I don't think the timing is right either. If the city did want residents to advocate on behalf of the city, then that should maybe come from the city. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess.
I think that's awkward too.
I think you're reading more into it than what I thought was the conversation. I felt like it was, you guys wanted to be able to speak in a way that we had consistency that supported our agenda. And here, by the way, they're doing these statewide, these tours, and if you want to go advocate, you can encourage your residents to go advocate, but it's not like a rally. This is not how we're advancing our political agenda. It's more of a how to empower public.
About transportation.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'll probably just go ahead and ask her to sort of separate that out, because the call to action, if they should take it, is soon.
Well, we can just ask her to send it out in the Word document. It's no big deal.
Yes,
That's easy.
okay. And
And
then,
I think that there was discussion, maybe I wasn't at the last meeting, was I? I don't know, I know that these, you know, these listening tours are not necessarily that effective for our voice, but if you have, you know, constituents who want to, you know, express that need for, you know, more money so we can like pave the Winter Street or whatever, you know, advocating at the state level.
yes. That's what I was trying to do, but I was trying to figure out. I'll talk to her.
Great. We're good?
Sure. My
Cool.
my thoughts on these talking points. I'll be diplomatic. If you're gonna ask the public to do something, they need a photo, they need something specific. Like, to me, just asking fund state highway fund, right? I mean, so they need to know what roads we're talking about before they will be like, ooh, yes, I know that road. I felt the potholes on that road. You know, it's like, if you're gonna do it around transportation, you really need to have something concrete. Because just saying we need to have this pot of money filled for some nebulous purpose will not be as compelling. It won't be compelling at all, in my opinion. You know, when people can see a specific need and see a specific solution, then they will pick up the phone and call their legislator. That's my input.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned.